The following program is brought to you by Blue Shield of California.
Hello, I'm Dr. David Watts. My practice of medicine is at the University of California in San Francisco, where I'm on the teaching faculty. I've also been involved in national health education for years, and one of the things that I've noticed is that while the issue of healthy aging has become very important, there are still some myths about growing older that need to be dispelled. Not all older men and women are sickly and frail. Not all older men and women are poor. And most definitely, they don't just sit around in their rocking chairs. Today, people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s are healthy, vibrant, and they lead active lives. Once we realize that 65 is not old, suddenly life opens up to all sorts of possibilities. Older men and women start on second careers. Some become actors or students or athletes in the Senior Olympics. When it becomes clear that the old myths are not only untrue but unnecessary, the quality of life improves dramatically. Everyone can improve their flexibility, their health, and their intellect to take full advantage of their later years. The program you're about to see explains how life has changed for older adults and how older adults are changing our world. Psychologist and gerontologist Ken Dykewald brings you to the crest of the age wave.
The Age Wave with Dr. Ken Dykewald. Dr. Ken Dykewald is widely viewed as the nation's foremost authority on the social and business implications of an aging America. As a gerontologist, psychologist, sought-after lecturer, and best-selling author, he has shared his vision in hundreds of newspaper and magazine articles. And his latest work, Age Wave. Not only has Dr. Dykewald changed the way corporations and institutions do business, but he has altered the very way we view aging in our society. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Ken Dykewald.
Great. We're going to be taking a look at the whole issue of the aging of America. And the way I'd like to go after this subject is to break it up into easily digestible pieces. First, we're going to look at the demographic events that are causing the aging of America. We'll take a look at the senior boom, what's going on today in America right now with regard to the incredible growth in the number of older people in our country. And then we'll take a look at the other major demographic event that's causing the aging of America, the aging of the post-World War II baby boom generation. Once we've looked at those two demographic pieces, we'll then bundle them together and throw our nets into the future a ways and see if we can imagine how aging will change in the years to come. But first, let's look at the senior boom. We all know that more people are living longer and living better than any other time in history. Now, this is a chart of the average life expectancy worldwide from the year 1000 to 1985 here in the United States. And what you notice is that in the year 1000, the average life expectancy was only 25. Before we had things like technology and the kinds of medical and health tech capabilities we have today, most people didn't live that long. When we signed our Declaration of Independence in 1776, the life expectancy in America was only 35 years. And the point of it is that in the past, people didn't age. They died. Now, if we come back to this chart, and let's think about that for a second. Imagine living in a world where most people didn't grow old, they died. In a world like that, couples didn't say, gee, honey, what would you like to do after retirement? Because you'd be dead after retirement. Companies didn't worry about dealing with retirees because there weren't any. As a nation, we didn't worry that much about intergenerational financial transfers like Social Security and Medicare because we died young. And that's the way it was throughout all of time. So can imagine being a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old or a 40-year-old in a world where most people lived only to 40 or 50 years. But as you can see, during the past century, because of extraordinary breakthroughs in healthcare, the average life expectancy has begun to skyrocket. It's jumped all the way to 75 today. Now, the effect of all this is sort of amazing. As a result of improvements in healthcare and such, fewer people are dying as young as they used to. They're living longer, and as a result, we've got this incredible senior boom going on. If you look in the year 1880, we had about 2.5 to 3 million people over the age of 65. Not enough to worry about, not enough to make a mature marketplace for, not enough to even think about in any deep political way. But as you can see, during the past century, the number of older people has multiplied to about 30 million today. We have more people today over the age of 65 in the United States than the entire population of Canada. And this is literally a nation within a nation, getting bigger, stronger, bolder, a little more sexually outrageous, a little more politically outspoken with every second that passes. There is a new aging going on right now in America. In ways that we often don't stop to reflect on, we have designed our world to match the size and shape and style of the people we've been. And who we've been has been young. For example, the chairs you're sitting in were designed for the body of a young person. You may have already noticed that, the way they move back and forth. The lights we use in our public environments were designed for the eyes of the young. For example, did you know that people at the age of 80 need 3 times the light to see things clearly compared to 20-year-olds? Fluorescent lights, very popular in our public buildings, the way they work is they flutter very quickly. When you're young, your eyes don't notice the flutter. As you grow older and you cross your eyes around a room with fluorescent lights, you see glare. The height of the steps in our public environments were designed for the physiologic patterns of young people. And how about so-called public transportation, the bus? Imagine a 70-year-old woman with 2 shopping bags trying to get on so-called public transportation. Can't be done. Buttons, a simple thing like buttons, designed for the fingers of the young. We've got 40 million Americans right now with arthritis, many of whom can't open and close buttons. Yet it doesn't occur to the clothing manufacturers to design clothing appropriate to older hands. And how about the typeface in the newspapers, in the books, in the printed materials we read? Whose eyes can read that? And I love the pharmaceutical companies that make tamper-proof bottles for arthritics. The length of time it takes the traffic lights to change were geared to the swift movement patterns of younger people. We could go on, but what you begin to realize is that our world, almost like a cookie-cutter situation, has been designed in reflection of who we've been, on the exterior and on the interior as well. If you ask the average American, when are the good years of life? Young is good. When are the bad years of life? Old is not so good. What does that say about a people? That we've spent the last 10,000 years trying to grow old people, and now that we're doing a pretty darn good job, we're embarrassed about it. And in all sorts of interesting ways, we've designed a youth-focused culture, which is just fine as long as we all stay young forever. But an interesting thing is happening, and that is that the overall shape of our country is growing older. We are becoming an older, a more mature nation. This next piece of information I think you'll all find very personally challenging, and it has to do with the fact that women live longer than men. Now you see, when we all used to die young, this was never an issue. As recently as the 1930s, for every 100 women, there were 99 men. It was basically the same. But now that we're playing out this longevity game, we notice that the female, by the way, the female of all animal species outlive the males. Females are better prepared for this long life. So, for example, in the 55 to 64-year-old age category, for every 100 women, there's only 88 men. Some of the men are smiling, some of the women are not. In the 85-plus category, something very challenging happens. For every 100 women, there's only 42 men alive. So an aging society means increasingly a female society, means increasingly a female-alone society. Women joining into groups with other women, women forming relationships based on friendship and family and kinship, because this traditional male-female doesn't quite match up in the later years. So let's just ruminate for a second on some of the changes, and there's many, but let's just ruminate on some of the changes we might expect. One of the changes, I think, is well captured in this Newsweek cover. All of a sudden, we've got adult children caring for parents. Sociologists are now calling these women or men members of the sandwich generation. By the way, here's a little quiz for you. Of all those, let's say, middle-aged adult children caring for their moms and dads, caregiving children, what percentage today do you think are women, and what percentage today do you think are men? Last year it was 92% women, 8% men. So here we find the women of America, who I think already have a difficult challenge to being super moms and super professionals and raising kids. All of a sudden, at least in this particular cohort, a lot of the burden or challenge or love or responsibility of caring for mom seems to be being assumed by them. Now think about this for a second. When some of you think, oh, that's happening to those other people. In 1986, for the first time in the history of the world, in our country, one of the most peculiar anomalies of long life began and will continue throughout our life. beginning in that year, the average woman, you, can expect to spend more years caring for your mother than you did your children. You might spend 20 years caring for your kids and 30 years caregiving a parent. And here's another one, that this year, for the first time in history, the average American has more parents than children. These next slides I find very, very useful, and I'd like to share with you what we're moving into now. One of the most interesting themes is not aging in terms of the numbers of people, but aging in terms of what we think about it. Each of us, whether we're an expert in gerontology or not, has a certain set of assumptions in our mind about who the elderly are, what they look like, whether they're rich or poor, happy or sad, and probably what we're going to be like when we get old. But the amazing thing is that if I could open up your mind and make a list of all that you believe about aging, what we'd find is that a lot of what you believe is wrong. So over the last several years, the American Association of Retired Persons has attempted to try to figure out what's the truth about aging in America. Let me help you interpret the slides. Older people all across the country were asked, how many of you are having a hard time with your health? The purple bar represents the percentage of older people who said they're struggling with their health, self-reported. The orange bar represents what young people thought they'd say. Young people think old people are falling apart. Old people think they're doing fine. And the question is, who are the 80-year-old women of America? This or this? And you know what the answer is? Both. Older people were also asked, let's find out what the deal is regarding how you feel about money. How many of you are struggling with poverty or with financial difficulties? Only 18% of the elderly say they're having trouble with money. Look what young people thought they'd say. Young people think old people are all broke. The yellow bar is even more interesting. It represents what older people thought other older people would say. So it's like, gee dear, we're doing okay, but the rest of them. Now, let me be very careful here. Do we have poor older people? Yes, there's a lot of poor older people in America. In fact, it's one of the saddest statements about our culture that while so many of us are living so well, there are so many older people who are desperately struggling to survive. But not all the old are poor. Also today in America, we've got rich older people. And that's a very interesting thing for the future of business, because we're used to thinking of the elderly as being all poor, but they're not. Right now, there are people so poor who are old, they can't afford to buy food or medicine. They will die today, right now, in our country, in our time. But also today in America, by our best capabilities of analyzing Census Bureau data, there's approximately 600,000 millionaires in America receiving Social Security payments. So the elderly poor? Yes, but they're also rich too. Approximately half the millionaires in America are over the age of 65. And by the way, that's a story that we often don't tell. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to take my jacket off for a moment. Let's put that over there. Now, if I can use myself for an example here, I'll become the human seesaw. American demography has always been like a seesaw, and I'm going to oversimplify. We had lots of kids and not a lot of old people. Kids were great. Kids bought things. They broke things. They spent on things. They were always growing, always changing. They were the future. Older people, well, now I don't particularly think that's a very conscious or enlightened way to think about the different stages of life, but it happens to be a descriptor of what we've been doing for the last number of decades. A very heavy emphasis on the possibilities of youth, a very low emphasis on the possibilities of age. And of course, the numbers match that up. Lots of kids, not a lot of old people. What is happening is that for the first time in history, because of declines in mortality, the number and power of the elderly is rising faster than the rest of the population, twice as fast as the population at large. And at the same time, since 1964, there's been a decline in fertility and birth rates in America. And the number and power of the young is actually declining. So we've got a decline in the power and emphasis on youth. At the same time, we've got a rise in the power and emphasis on old. Neither of these events have ever happened quite this way before. Combined, the effect is historic. What is the effect? The hourglass of American culture, which is always tipped this way, is now turning upside down. You came into this life with youth being the hero. You will leave with age being in charge. In your lifetime, the change will happen. The era of the United States as being a youth-focused culture is coming to an end and will never occur again. It's over. Now, those two events by themselves would be enough to change America. But there's a third event coming along that will even exacerbate this phenomenon more so. And what is that? It has to do with the fact that the post-World War II baby boom generation is growing older. From 1946 to 1964, the sustained baby boom, during that 18-year period, 76 million seniors were born. 1/3 the entire population mass of America, part of the same generational cohort. Now, when you add up these events, the senior boom, the birth dearth, and the aging of the baby boomers, you get a demographic change. You don't get an age quake. You don't get a boom. What you begin to get, at least from my point of view, is a complete shift in American culture, an age wave. It's almost as though not just a piece or two of our culture is changing, but the very fabric, the foundation, the axis is shifting. We're moving into a culture where more and more of us are growing older in different ways. The center of gravity of America is shifting and will never leave us the same. I think we're going to see new ways of growing old. It will not only be more numbers of middle-aged and older people, but I think as well new ways of aging. What are some of those changes? Here's one. The slide says, "Coming soon everywhere, the wild adults, the story of life in the slow lane." Well, what do I mean by this? I think one of the first changes you're going to see is that middle-aged and older people are going to decide to live active lifestyles. There's a story I love to tell that I think well captures this theme, the story of a more active and dynamic lifestyle. A number of years ago, I was directing a project in Berkeley. For those of you who are not aware, after starting out as an engineer, I switched to psychology, which is where I got my doctorate, but I've been trying to make sense for my own life of this field of gerontology for these past 15 years. So that strange hodgepodge of backgrounds, I guess, is how I come to this field. And a couple of years ago, there was an elder couple working with me in a project I was involved with. And one day, the wife approached me. This is a true story. And she said, "Ken, I need to talk to you about something very personal. I know you're a therapist, or you got some training there. Can we talk?" I said, "Sure. What's up?" "Well," she said, "I've decided to divorce George, her husband." "Goodness," I said. "How long have you and George been married?" 52 years, she said. "Boy, why do you want to divorce him?" She says, "Well, two reasons. Number one, I don't love him anymore. And number two," she said, "he's a jerk." Now, who am I to say? I don't personally think divorce is a good thing. It can be very unsettling for people in any age. So I turned back to her and trying to hold this marriage together. I said, "Come on, how long have you felt this way? Maybe you just had a hard month." She thought for a second and she said, 22 years. And I said, "Well, why didn't you divorce him 22 years ago?" She said to me, "When I was 57 and first felt this way, life expectancy was 62. I figured, I'm an old lady. I'll be dead soon. Why bother?" "But they tricked me," she said. "Here I am. I'm 78 years old. I'm healthy as a horse. I know I've got 20 more good years left in me, and I'll be darned if I'm going to spend them with this jerk." What else are we learning? We're learning that this marker of old age 65 may not be relevant for the future. Do any of you know where or when 65 was actually chosen to be a marker of old age? Social Security, actually not. It was actually before Social Security, we believe. In the 1880s in Germany, Baron Otto von Bismarck was asked to create the first pension plan in Europe and was asked to choose an age that could be called old. He picked 65. He actually picked 70, was talked down to 65. Fair. But it's important that you know that the life expectancy was 45. Bismarck was a smart guy. By the way, even when Social Security was drafted, the day of the signing, do you know what the life expectancy was? 61.9 years. So what was the deal? Hey, we'll take care of you for the rest of your life after you get old. Still here? I think there'll be new stages of life. I think 40 to 60 will be middle adulthood, or I have a friend who calls it middlescence. I think 60 to 80 will be late adulthood. By the way, an entirely new stage of life. Every 50 or 60 years, a new stage of life blossoms forward. Late adulthood, not old age. And I believe in the years to come, old age will most likely be marked at 80 or even 85 plus. I think that not only will the marker of old age change, it's no longer 65, it's a little bit later, but I think that information will telegraph back, will reverberate back throughout the life cycle. What do I mean by that? Historically, we have lived our lives, whether you consciously consider it or not, in a kind of a linear life arrangement. You did one thing, then the next thing, and then the next thing, and then you were done. And they had to be in a certain sequence. First we learned, then we got married and started working, and we worked, and then we died. And that was life. Thousands and thousands of years. Then we started living a little bit longer, and so we decided it would be nice to have learning, working, and then resting, and call it a life. I think we're seeing the rise of what I'll call a cyclic life plan, in which the lockstep of work, leisure, and education is broken up, and they become interspersed over the life cycle. What does this look like? People going to school at 50, people falling in love at 70, women having children in their 40s, people getting married 2 and 3 times, serial, cyclic lives. We can be many people in one life these days. You see it already happening around us. One of the things that many older people are liking to do is to play. Did you know that 85% of today's over 65 population don't work? We have the first leisure class in American history. Most older people say that when they quit working, they don't want to stop working forever. They would just like to work less hard and less often. Me too. You're going to start seeing changes in the workplace, more flexible scheduling, part-time work, flexible scheduling work, job bank, hour bank, sabbaticals. More common as we grow older and want to take a little bit of that late life leisure and drop it in throughout the life cycle. What else are we noticing? Big boom in education right now in America is adult education, not grade school education. So some older people are wanting to go back to work, some want to play, some want to learn, and I think this next piece is something we're going to see even more of in the years ahead. Many older people want to give. They don't want to be a drain, they want to be a resource. In fact, I think the big mistake we make in America is that we all too often think of the elderly as wanting to take. Yet if you spend time in the land of old, you discover that people there want to give. I think there ought to be an elder corps for those people who want to volunteer 2 or 4 or 8 hours in our schools, in our churches, in our communities, in our corporations, in our families. How strange that so often people talk about the problem of the aging of America. Hey, we spent the last 10,000 years, I'll say it again, making old people. And now that we're doing a great job of it, we haven't figured out what to do with it. What's the problem? The elderly or our lack of imagination? One of my favorite clients is Boswell Hospital in Sun City, Arizona, a medium-sized community hospital. Most hospitals that size have 1 or 2 or maybe 300 active volunteers. Boswell has discovered the secret of the aging of America. They understand that older people are an incredible resource, not a drain. Boswell has 2,000 volunteers. Now stay with me on this point. On this lawn, you have got 150,000 years of human experience. Is that a drain? It's an awesome resource. Awesome resource. And these are not 150,000 years of 3-year-old children. These are mechanics and carpenters and accountants and lawyers and doctors and homemakers and religious leaders. 2,000 people. We've got 30 million Americans over 65. Most of us who are young think of them as a drain. Is the problem them or us? It's probably both. And I think also we're going to start asking ourselves, as we redefine aging, what does 60 look like anyhow? Does it look like this? Or like this? Paul Newman is 63 years old. Now, does everybody look like Paul Newman? No. Does everybody want to? Probably not. But more and more we're beginning to... Does look pretty good. I'm often asked, I do a lot of work with television networks, and they always say, oh, isn't Paul Newman the exception? Sure, I mean, there are very few men as attractive as him and so on and so forth. But let me tell you this, if you go out into aging America, you will meet millions of men and women in their 50s and 60s and 80s who are vigorous and sexy and dynamic and clever and all the wonderful things you'd like to be. They're there. Believe me, they're there. And what are the popular shows these days? You may have noticed, this is not the Leave It to Beaver show. This is the Leave It to Ward and June show. See, in the popular shows today, it's the kids who don't count. They come, they go, they get killed. Who cares? Nobody cares. It's the parents we're interesting. It's the parents we want to know about. Now, not only are we changing our demographic makeup? And not only are we changing some of the way we think about the middle and later years of life, and not only are we redefining what is old, what is young, what is very old, what are the qualities and capabilities we might achieve in our life, but the business of America is beginning to wake up to the mature marketplace. Let's look at some examples. The communications industry is beginning. Various new magazines. The incredible rise of Modern Maturity, which some of you may know, this month became the largest magazine in America, just past Reader's Digest and TV Guide. Frances Lear, Norman Lear's ex-wife, just came out with a new magazine for women over 40 with a positive style. What does the advertising say? If you're under 40, lie about your age. It's now in to be over 40, out to be under 40. The Comfortably Yours catalog, with various appliances and assistive devices and clothing for older people, akin to the Sharper Image catalog. And for those of you in business, there's an interesting lesson here, because every generation's got qualities or affinities that draw it to certain products. Young people are drawn to sharp images. Older people are drawn to comfort. They've grown up. Another good example is a simple bottle opener. Perhaps Arnold Schwarzenegger comes to your house each morning and opens your bottles for you. Using the security system for more than just a phone, for telecommunications, for sending information across our computers, for home buying at the supermarket, for health monitoring, for making a smart house so that a house can be under control as a person grows older. Will be all sorts of new capabilities we'll see in the area of communications. How about the garden scoot? The #1 outdoor hobby among the elderly is gardening. Why not make it easier so you can work in your garden without hurting your back? By the way, you can sit down if you want to have some fun and imagine 1,000 products that don't currently exist that'll be needed in the years ahead for a different physiology. A soft bathtub just came on the market. Very attractive. Here's what it looks like from the side. It's soft. You sit into it, it cushions around you. So if you slip, you won't hurt yourself. Way more comfortable. Now you're even beginning to see curious twists on old products with new angles. Polaroid pitching the product for grandma graduating college. This is a retirement community. It bombed. The advertisement used to say, Coronado Heights, the place you'd like to live. Nobody moved in. They changed the tagline. It now says, the place you'll want your mom to live. And they market it to the adult children. It filled up in 6 weeks. And we learned something else about the mature marketplace, is that you've got several generations buying for each other. Now, we've seen that before in grandparenting. You know where the highest density of toy products purchasing goes on? Where grandmas live. Retirement communities. They buy for their grandchildren, the expensive stuff. By the same token, we're going to begin to seeing children buying for their parents, or saying, gee, Mom, have you considered this financial services plan? Or, gee, Mom, have you considered this or that, or this house, or a way to make yourself more comfortable? The leisure industry is beginning to realize, gee, we keep catering to the young, but catering to an older population. And you're seeing it. 80% of the luxury travel in America is purchased by people over the age of 55. They have the time, they've got the resources, and leisure, by the way, doesn't always have to be expensive. Leisure can be a trip to the museum. It can be elder hostel. It can be a learning program at the library. I think the leisure industry is going to multiply, mark my words, 500-fold in the next 15 years. Products, services, games, exploratoriums, Epcot centers, learning leisure, travel leisure, Arctic zone leisure, archaeological digs, doing things interesting and exciting with your mind, in addition to just playing. Here's an ad that I think is pretty neat. AT&T, flirt with her again, call the United Kingdom. You know how older people want to be portrayed? Just like you and I. Positive, attractive, real, caring, intelligent, same as you and I. And I think one of the questions we're going to be asking ourselves is, what could it be to be 70? What could 70 really look like? What might we be in the years to come? This gentleman is 70. How many say he looks pretty darn good? As you can say, he won 6 medals in a previous Olympic. How many would say he looks pretty good at 70? Right? He's up, he's alive, he's standing, right? Pretty darn good. Nothing wrong with that. This next gentleman's a little bit older. He's 72. He's behind the screen, actually, Alice. Most people say, oh, goodness, that's a fluke of nature. It's not a fluke of nature. Ever been to the Senior Olympics? Ever been to the Masters Olympics? We got some unbelievable athletes now in their 60s and 70s. But I will tell you this, It is the exception to be this fit in the later years. But yet, wouldn't you agree that in evolution, we have a way of taking those exceptions we find most attractive and making them the norm? I think what we miss in America is a positive image of aging. I think it's important that we concern ourselves with the problems of aging, but at the same time we're concerned for the problems and trying to repair them and heal them, we should be reaching for something greater than we've ever been before. Wouldn't you agree? And my completing thoughts to you, these last several pictures. I think what we need in America is heroes. I think we need elder heroes. I believe we're a hero-driven nation. I'd like to share with you a few of my heroes. They don't need to be your heroes, but these are people I'd like to have some of in me as I grow to my old age. I am fascinated by Mother Teresa. Here's a powerful woman with unbounding abilities to love and make good things happen for people who are not. The power of love and compassion that may come stronger as the physiology fades in an aging society. I believe it will. How about Lena Horne? At 70, a couple of months ago, being voted one of the 10 most beautiful black women in America. At 70. And by the way, she's singing better than ever at 70. How about George Burns, one of my heroes, who says, the most important thing about life is honesty and sincerity. If you can fake that, you've got it made. And now we're beginning to hear a new message in America, a very interesting message, a different message than perhaps you came into this room with, that aging itself is changing. There's a new elderly in our country, busier, more active, healthier, more vigorous, more powerful. Who might we become in the years ahead as we continue to grow old in new and different ways? I believe that the elderly of tomorrow will be a very different breed, be us. That we're just learning how to grow old, like a child learns to walk when he does it for the first time, or she does it for the first time. We are learning how to be old. We're not quite sure how to do it. I believe the elderly of tomorrow will be very different than the elderly of yesterday. What does all this mean? It's an interesting challenge we have at this moment in history. This is a big story going on, a historic moment. We are shifting from being a youth-oriented culture to one in which the middle and later years of life are becoming the most dynamic and powerful and active. The challenge we have is what to make of those years. What we've done so well to this point in history is to find ways to add years to our lives. Perhaps the next major challenge is to see if we can make some sense of adding life to those years. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Clearly, we have some exciting years ahead of us. As for me, I plan to lead a full life. Who knows how many careers I may have in my lifetime? Physician, media personality, musician, maybe even a poet. The point is, the options are there for all of us. In the meantime, if you have questions or want more information on aging in America, write to the address that appears on your screen. Thanks for watching. I'm Dr. David Watts.
This program has been brought to you by Blue Shield of California.